usually the first thing we would do is to get that converter out of the way. We left this one in just so that we can see where it's going to contact the new bracket. It needs to go away, so just move it, and move it before you remove the brackets. It'll give you a lot better access for cutting, grinding, and even welding. Converter removal is really a pretty simple process. Just disconnect the O2 sensor by pinching the release and separating the connector. Now again, this is a 2011, so the 2010s and the 2011s both need to have the converter turned and moved back to clear the new frame bracket. Now on the 2012s, it's a completely different animal, and we'll need to address those later. There's a bend in the exhaust tube just a few inches in front of the converter. We'll make our cut just past the bend, so it gives us a nice straight section of pipe to weld to and extend. For the rear cut, make it easy on yourself. Cut where there's plenty of room, and make sure it'll be easy to weld. A simple reference is to mark the pipe by laying a pen against the front of the frame and just drawing a line on the pipe. If you happen to have a marking pen that'll lay down some ink, it'll really help you too. With the pipe marked, just lay your saw up against the cross member and make the cut as square as possible. All right, there's two problems with this converter. The one is that O2 sensor hits right on our bracket, and the other one is it needs to be rotated around. So we need to rotate it and move it back. So what we're going to do is cut 2.5 inches out of the back end of it, and that'll put us right into that bend. So if we look at about a 2.5 inch mark there, right in there. We'll get that cut, and then we'll move that piece so it'll slide this converter back. In the meantime, let's look at our bracket. Okay, this bracket can now, we can just slide it into position here. Throw a couple of bolts in it to hold it up there for us for a minute. And then we'll just mark around it to see where we're going to be welding, where we need to grind all the powder coat off of the bracket here. Going to start a couple of nuts. We have some gaps here that we're going to use a clamp on to hold it into position. That's all right. For right now, all we want to do is mark along everywhere that we're going to want to grind that powder coating. Now again, everywhere we can weld, we're going to do it inside and outside. We're also going to weld along the top of the bracket back here. We'll grind that off. You can't weld on the back side of it because your cross member's there, so don't weld it to the cross member. You may need to take that out sometime. You'll be real disappointed. We're going to come along the back side, all along here. We're going to come around the edges, even this bracket that holds the bolt in, up along the upside of this. Just everywhere this makes contact. So we pretty much got it marked up here. So let's bring it down, we'll clean it up and get it welded in position. The good news is with that converter out of the way, we got great access to weld. So we want to be sure and clean and grind a wide area around all the weld surfaces, at least an inch, even 1.5 inches. That powder coat and paint make for a very contaminated weld, so we need to clean up both sides of the bracket on those edges that are being welded. Good prep will go a long ways towards a good weld. With the bracket all cleaned up and the frame all ready to weld, we just want to throw this bracket into position, put a couple of bolts in it. What we're going to do is get it kind of bolted up, and then we'll use a C-clamp. Clamp that into position so we can get that bracket right up against the frame, just to kind of eliminate any gaps when we're welding. as far as it'll go. Kind of look around it and make sure that we've got good contact everywhere, that C-clamps pushed it in that way. We're good back here. Just throw one more clamp up here. We still got a little gap right there that I wanted to just get rid of. Oh yeah, that pulls it in nice. Tight there, tight across the top. Looks good. We're ready to weld. Our goal here is to weld the brackets everywhere they contact the frame. So that's both sides of the bracket and inside and out wherever possible. Most bracket failures that we see are due to contamination and other welding issues. It'll really help with bracket integrity to throw some weld at it. Don't be afraid to weld. Weld is good. Try to make a nice squared up cut, especially if you plan on using that 2-inch section of pipe as an extension piece on the front when you reinstall that converter. Take a few seconds and clean up the cut, and we're ready to install the cat. All right, with this catalytic converter out of the way, it made it pretty nice to weld this bracket on. We've got that all welded up and good to go, so let's go ahead and throw our converter back in. Now remember, we cut the end off it back here, so that scooted us back a couple inches, and so we have a couple of gaps to fill. There's a couple of ways to do this. We just made a couple of just collars on the bender, so we'll just slide one on there, and that's going to give us just a place to weld around so we don't have to butt weld them. You can butt weld them if you'd prefer, but if you just throw these on, it makes it kind of easy. So we'll just slide that one on. So sleeve up here. That extension piece kicked us back that 2 inches we were trying to gain so that that bracket will clear that O2 sensor. Pull that on. Slide them into position. I kind of like using these sleeves too because it allows you to move that converter right where you want it, just to clear everything so there's not going to be any vibration. Everything clears. And it'll hang there, and then you can just go ahead and weld it up. Oh, now here's an important safety tip that'll save you one of those "what was I thinking" moments. Make sure you position that O2 so that it can be removed and replaced should the need arise. Now the tip of that oxygen sensor is going to extend into the exhaust a good inch or so, so give yourself some room so you can take it out. Now, it's really possible to cut this converter out anywhere you'd like, but by making the cuts where we did, it gives us a lot better access to reinstall the new converter. Once you've got the converter all welded into place, you'll want to start the Jeep and probably block the exhaust and then just check for exhaust leaks.